and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Caroline Strawson, a multi-award-winning trauma-informed coach and the narcissistic abuse recovery therapist. Please hit like and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you don't miss any of my videos that I put out regularly to help educate, inspire you in your journey to heal after the trauma of narcissistic abuse. I use a unique integration of therapies to really get to the root cause of the narcissistic abuse that you are feeling, right at the core of your very soul. So I use therapies such as EMDR, brain spotting, rapid transformational therapy, positive psychology, and parts therapy to really help you understand why you even ended up maybe in a relationship with a narcissist, what it's like to have a narcissistic parent. And it's my passion to really help you understand this so that you can stop living in that long dark tunnel and see that light at the end of it so that you can finally move forward and live the life that I know you deserve to have. So in today's episode, I want to talk to you about codependency and the narcissist, because a codependent is a magnet, literally a magnet to a narcissist. So I want to talk to you exactly what codependency is. So codependency is really a lack of yourself. It's a lack of self-love, self-belief, self-esteem, self-respect, a real lack of self. At the core of who we are when we come into this world, we expect love to be available. We expect our needs to be met. Now, through our childhood, if that doesn't happen for whatever reason, and again, this can be from abuse and neglect, but equally it can come from parents who are just incapable of showing us that. You know, they may have had an unemotional childhood themselves. So it doesn't necessarily mean abuse, but it can mean trauma to you. So it can be overwhelmed to the system. So codependency comes about from your childhood. Again, you're not born a codependent, and equally, you're not born a narcissist. And actually, at the core of a narcissist is also codependency. So I'll explain a bit about this in a moment. So the wound that comes from being a codependent is this lack of self-love. So I want you to imagine now that you have this, what I call a hole in your soul, this wound of, I am not good enough, I am not worthy, this lack of self that you don't know simply for being who you are, simply for being Caroline or whoever you are, that is good enough. And that could have been from your childhood that maybe you only got praise if you got straight A's. Maybe you only got praise if you looked a certain way. You learned that love may have been conditional. You learned that just for being you didn't get that love and attention that you wanted. It was because of something else. And also what can happen is if your parents are behaving in a certain way, as that child, we need to understand a reason why our parents are maybe showing that lack of love. Maybe they're not praising us as we want. Maybe we're doing things and nothing is being said. And we need a reason for that, just like we do as adults. But the reason we often come to as a child is never, my parents aren't praising me right now because they had an unemotional childhood. Well, we don't think that as a child. We don't have that cognitive ability, but we still need a reason for that. And very often that reason, then we bring it back to us. Okay, so if my parent isn't praising me, then that must be because I'm not good enough. So I'm going to try harder. And what we're doing then as parents is they are conditioning their children to try even harder to get the love that they are desperately seeking. So as kids, we are really like a love-seeking missile. We just want that love. We want that connection. But if we don't get that, we don't think it's our parents' fault or our caregivers, because they're the adults, right? They're meant to know better. They're older than us. They're meant to be the font of all knowledge. And something that will make you laugh is, and I actually remember this happening. And when I look back, I think, Caroline, goodness me, what were you thinking? But I actually remember, I think I was probably about 23 years old, when I actually realized that my parents were human beings. Now you might think, what do you want about, Caroline? But really up until that point, I thought how my mum and dad behaved was exactly how you should behave, because they were my parents and they know better and they're older and they're wise and they should know all of this. I didn't actually realize that they were human beings with hurt and pain and wounds. I didn't get that till I was about 23. And it was a real eye-opener for me. And actually, when I then divorced a narcissist in 2010, it really made me look at my own childhood and why I had then been attracted to narcissistic relationships. Because as I started to look back, I realized, wow, I hadn't just been married to a narcissist. I'd attracted narcissistic friends many times. In fact, my middle sister, Laura, always used to say to me, Caroline, you're so crap at choosing friends. Because I was. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had some amazing friends as well. So I don't want any of my friends listening to this thinking, but the ones listening to it that are no longer my friends, let's put that caveat in. So because I had become a codependent, and again, I had become a codependent because my mum was a codependent. So she was somebody, because of her childhood, that really had her sense of self-worth coming from being a mum. So that for a child felt really, really nurturing and loving for me as a child, that my mum was like this. But actually, the pressure of my mum only being happy when she was being a mum to me, and I've got two older sisters, but they left home. So I was at home a lot with my parents on my own. So that sense of responsibility of me being at home on my own with my parents for my mum's happiness, that sense of worth. And I remember when I went away to university at 18, feeling that incredible sense of responsibility that I was taking away my mum's sense of worth, because that came from being a mum, and I felt dreadful about that. So I'd got this excitement about going to university, but equally I felt this loss. I felt this, I'm not a good enough daughter, because my mum was unhappy. You know, yes, she was saying she was happy I was going away and she wanted independent daughters, but I knew there was this real sense of deep sadness that her almost being this nurturing mother was coming to an end, because I wasn't actually going to be living at home anymore. And I really felt that sense of responsibility. Now, the other side of the coin with my dad, so my dad never said things like, I love you, or I'm proud of you. So that for me became, well, if my dad isn't saying that, is it me? Am I not good enough? Do I need to try harder? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? Because maybe if I did, maybe he would then say that. I didn't recognize as that child that the reason my dad wasn't saying that wasn't because I wasn't good enough. The reason he wasn't saying that was because he was incapable of saying that because of his childhood. But I didn't know that as a child. All I knew was that I thought I was being this great daughter, this amazing child, and I wasn't getting praise and love from my dad. Now, my dad did used to drive me all over the country for tennis and netball, but I didn't see that as love as a child. All I saw was my dad wasn't saying those things to me. And because he wasn't saying them to me, that must mean it was me. So that kind of created a deep wound for me of this not feeling good enough, this lack of sense of self, this self-love deficit disorder, because I didn't think I was good enough. And this is what we call codependency. And as a codependent, because I had this not feeling good enough, this lack of sense of self, meant I did not want anyone to find me out. So I would do this, anything and everything to please other people. I was this massive people pleaser, because if I pleased everybody, if I was perfect in everything, maybe they wouldn't find out that I wasn't good enough or worthy. They'd have to behave in a certain way if I was pleasing them. They'd have to behave in a certain way if I was this amazing person and doing and high achieving and being perfect in everything. But of course, I was putting it in the hands of other people who weren't capable of then behaving in a certain way for me to feel like that. Because I was always looking externally for that approval and validation, because that's how I was taught, that for me to feel good enough, I needed to play a role. I needed to be a certain way. And it was, if I needed to feel good enough, then I needed to make somebody else behave in a certain way. So they acted in a certain way for me to know then, yep, I'm worthy, I'm good enough, because they're happy, they're feeling good. So if I was ever around someone who was unhappy or angry, oh my goodness me, that was like a red rag to me, because it was like, must be my fault. So I'd try and fix it. I'd try and make everything okay, but that led me to be exhausted. So you imagine from a narcissist perspective, they also have a deep wound of not feeling worthy or good enough. And again, we don't know why as a child somebody then becomes a narcissist and someone becomes a codependent. We don't actually know why at this point in time. We just know that there are certain scenarios where people become a codependent and a narcissist. But you could have two parents with two children, and one could become a narcissist and one could become a codependent. Same parents, same household, but one will become a narcissist and one will become a codependent. The codependent will recognize all of this, and that's why codependents can heal. The narcissist will not recognize that. So the narcissist, again, will have very similar deep wounds of lack of self-worth, but their false sense of self, their protector parts come up and are so strong that that then becomes their false sense of self. You can never get beyond that. You know, I know as a therapist and coach, I would love to help people with narcissistic personality disorder. I'd love to help cure them, but I can only help somebody when they actually acknowledge that there is an issue. But the narcissist's such strong protector parts are there and being so strong that you never get beyond to the wound. So I can't help someone with a wound that they won't acknowledge that they actually have because they're too busy projecting that hurt out onto other people. Now, the codependent will behave in a certain way. So the person that they are with should or expect to act in a certain way for them to feel good enough. This makes them a magnet to a narcissist. So the narcissist needs other people to make them feel good. So I need you to behave in a certain way, and that gives the narcissist supply. The codependent will, I need to feel good enough, and to do that, I need to please you and behave in a certain way, so you then act in a certain way for me to know I'm good enough. So of course you have this vicious circle then. The codependent will be pleasing the narcissist. The narcissist will be like, yeah, keep it coming, keep pleasing me, keep doing all of this. And that's what makes them a magnet to each other, because in some respects, both are getting a secondary gain by their behaviors. But what we know from a narcissistic perspective is if you are a codependent in that narcissistic relationship, at some stage, it won't be good enough. And that will leave you feeling empty. It will leave you feeling in these trauma responses of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, because it is really ripping the scab off your wound of not feeling good enough because of their behavior. So if they're ongoingly abusing you, and that might be subtle, it might be covert, it might be overt, and that leaves you then with the scab off your wound, bleeding away and desperately in those trauma responses. Because remember, your brain's perception is this is the most pain possible because it's taking you back to that child not feeling good enough with your dad or your mum again. That's so painful. Shut down, go into survival mode, and that's how we must survive. So being that codependent with a narcissist, you can change that. So you imagine a narcissist, if we're talking about sort of magnetism aspect. So a narcissist is like a North Pole magnet, so to speak. The codependent is like a South Pole magnet. They are going to absolutely attract each other. So what you need to do as the codependent is work on that deep inner wound of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. And when we can heal that, we can shift our energy. We shift our energy into a West magnet, okay? So when you are this West magnet, you're not going to attract a North. You're going to repel them, so to speak. You're going to understand you don't need the narcissist in some way to try and fill that hole in your soul, which they will do at the start with their love bombing. They will say and do and be all the things that they know you are lacking. You know, my ex-husband got a tattoo with my name on a month into our relationship. So for me at the time, not feeling good enough, I thought, wow, he must really like me to do that. So of course that was like for me filling up that deep wound in my soul. But of course now I know this is love bombing and, you know, very toxic and a huge red flag. You know, when I look back, I think, Caroline, what were you thinking? But of course at the time, because my wound was there, having somebody show me that level of attention was just wonderful to me, because it meant that someone thought I was good enough. And it was taking me away from the pain of what I felt as that child because of my dad. So really having that codependency is not about constantly seeking other people to make you feel better. To heal from codependency, it's really important for you to be able to heal that deep wound. Now, I have a program called Self-Hate to Self-Love, Healing Codependency. And you can find the link to this on my website, carolinestrawson.com. It's 12 lessons, and I go through and explain in far more detail than this, all about codependency, how you can start to heal from that. There are meditations for you to listen to, and it's so affordable. You know, it's a crazily insane price for you to be able to start your healing journey of codependency. Because I don't want you to be looking for other people to make you feel a certain way. Because when we put expectation on other people to behave in a certain way for you to feel good in your life, you don't know what their childhood's like. You don't know what wounds and hurts that they have. So if they're dealing with all of that, you're literally picking up your happiness and putting it in someone else's hands that is not capable of holding it. You need to hold it. You need to take responsibility. Go within, stop looking externally. Go within and heal that wound. Then it won't matter how anybody else behaves, because at the end of the day, you can't control anybody else. The only thing you can do is go within and heal your wounds. And when you heal your own codependency, your own deep wounds of lack of self-worth, give yourself all the things that you didn't get as that child. So this is when I will do a lot of reparenting techniques with my clients. When you do that, you change everything, because you stop looking externally to get your sense of self-worth.